The Rcmp Commissioner Brenda Lucki was asked on a series of media interviews, including by our own Lisa Laflamme, do you believe there's systemic racism in Canadian institutions like the Rcmp? She said, no, I believe there's unconscious bias, but not systemic racism. Today, the Prime Minister said, no, there is systemic racism in the Rcmp. Mr. Scheer, is there systemic racism in the Rcmp?
Well, first, let me say, to the question of whether or not there's systemic racism in Canada, I think the answer is clearly yes. We can look at policies within the Indian Act that denies the same rights to people living, Indigenous Canadians on reserve, denying them rights that other Canadians have off reserves. We pointed out that Bill Blair, the Liberal cabinet minister, instituted card checking in the city of Toronto when he was chief of police. I would challenge Justin Trudeau, though, if we want to make sure that when we're calling out systemic racism and we're calling out examples of that, we have to make sure that politicians like Justin Trudeau aren't allowed to just be saying these things as kind of a symbolic statement. If he is aware of systemic racism in the Rcmp, he's been Prime Minister for over 4 years now. He has the ability, this is a national federal police force, he has the ability to address that immediately. So if he's aware of it, he needs to clearly explain exactly where it is, how long he's known about it, and what he's going to do to fix it.
Well, okay, but he has talked about systemic racism. Let me just reiterate the question to you. Do you believe there's systemic racism inside the Rcmp?
Again, he can say it. He can say that there is, but it's up to him. He's the Prime Minister.
I'm asking you, though. To be fair, I'm asking you. What's your view? Is there systemic racism?
He is the one that said there is. So again, he needs to tell parliamentarians, tell Canadians why he's known about this for so long without doing anything about it. And my point here is, Evan, is that this is just another example of Justin Trudeau's phoniness, saying things, making these kinds of statements without taking ownership and responsibility for his own actions. He has been the Prime Minister of this country for over 4 years without doing anything about a problem that he knows exists.
I agree. I mean, he's appointed this commissioner, Brenda Lucki, who denies there's systemic. But I'm going to ask you just the third time, just if I understand that Justin Trudeau he says there's systemic racism. The commissioner of the Rcmp says there isn't. You're the leader of the official opposition. Do you believe there's systemic racism in the Rcmp? It seems like a simple question. What's your view?
Well, look, I believe that there are, of course, acts of racism and discrimination. I'm not in a position to contradict the commissioner of the Rcmp. In my role as leader of the opposition, I'm here to hold Justin Trudeau to account. And what I would say is that if Justin Trudeau is contradicting his own commissioner, he needs to tell us exactly why she's wrong, where are the aspects of systemic racism that he's aware of, why he hasn't done anything about it for so long, what he proposes to do about it, so that we don't just get into another situation where Justin Trudeau makes these statements and gestures without any action, without any meaning behind them. And I think that's what so many Canadians are frustrated about when they see Justin Trudeau throw these types of things around without clearly identifying what it is that he's talking about.
Although, to be fair, many marginalized groups, including the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, told me the first step is to acknowledge it and to say yes. He said, yes, there is systemic racism. The Prime Minister acknowledged it, but you, sir, are not acknowledging it.
But would you agree, Evan, that then the next step would be to clearly identify and explain where that systemic racism is so that we can do something about it? I mean, recall Parliament and say, look, we found exactly the aspects of the Rcmp that we believe are systemically racist, and here's what we're going to do about it. That's not what we're hearing. We're hearing Mr. Trudeau, again, just making these statements without clearly identifying what it is that he's talking about.
And it's a fair point. What will the actions be? Andrew Scheer, I got to leave it there, sir. I always appreciate having you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.